Hey guys, we'll get started in just a minute. I want to give other people an opportunity to come and join us before we get started. But we're going to be doing a live stream video of our quarantine area / fish nursery. So come on and join us and share this with your friends so we can get some more viewers and teach you guys a little bit about some of our fish in our behind the scenes area. Alrighty, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So good morning, everybody. My name's Britt, and I'm an aquarist here at the Virginia Living Museum. I am wearing a mask right now, so please let me know if it's hard to hear me, and I'll see if I can adjust it a little bit so you can hear me a little bit better. And if you have any questions or comments about any of the animals or our exhibits here, please feel free to put them in the comments down below. And even if I don't get to them, we have Alexis, who's another aquarist, on the computer ready to answer your questions in the comment section. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So like I said, this is the aquarium's quarantine / nursery room. So this has a lot of the animals that we have here in our aquatics section, or our aquatics department, and with all of our aquarium's animals. And this is where we keep them when they are not on exhibit. So we have lots of off exhibit areas where we can store our fish and keep them in nice healthy conditions when they're not on display for everybody. So you're going to get to have a behind the scenes look and see some of the fish that we may not have on exhibit at the moment. So we're going to start here at the tank that I was sitting in front of before. So in this tank we have several different kinds of fish. I know there's a bit of a reflection, so I'm going to do my best to avoid that. But these fish right here are called look downs, and they are a schooling fish, which means that they like to live in groups, just like they are doing right now. They're in a little school. And they're very shiny fish that are very thin. You can see as they turn, they almost disappear in the water, like that right there. And those are both really, really good adaptations for when you live out in the open ocean, because they're shiny, so they're hard for predators to see in the sparkling water. And they're very thin, so when they turn to the side, predators can barely see them. We've also got everyone's favorite here, which is called a striped burr fish. This is a member of the porcupine fish family, which is a type of puffers, basically. And these fish will expand to at least twice their size by inflating themselves full of water or air when they feel threatened. Ours typically don't do that because they very, very rarely feel threatened or spooked here. So they are nice and thin right now. And we've got the spadefish, which those of you who visit us before, you've definitely seen them in several of our tanks here. They are another schooling fish, but this guy, he's by himself in this tank right now. He was getting picked on by some other fish, so we decided to give him a little bit of a break, let him grow a little bit bigger, and then eventually he'll go back with everybody else. And one more fish that's in this tank is a fairly new member of our collection here. This is called a cunner. And they are a relative of the tautogs, so both of those names are pretty interesting. And they are both structure fish, so they really like rocks and shells, pilings, shallow waters with oyster beds, things like that. So they love to hide, and they love to be right up against stuff. So we have a question from Claire. She asked, what do they eat? All of the fish in this tank eat a lot of different things. We feed them several different kinds of chopped up fish, lots of little squid, shrimp, what's called gel diet, which is a little like an omnivore diet that is very good for fish and invertebrates. So they get a variety of different things every day. We try to give them something a little bit different. All right, so we're gonna move on to another one of our tanks here. And this tank is actually several tanks that are all connected. You can see there's many, many tanks along with their life support, which is the machinery and pumps and filtration systems down below here. So we're going to start up here at the top. This is another tank full of schooling fish. These are permit and pompano. as well as one little white perch who's kind of there in the back. You can see him, he's the spikiest one. These guys are a lot like the look downs in that they're very thin and very shiny, so predators can't see them. We have a question from Tyler. He wants to know, why do pufferfish have stripes? That's kind of a form of camouflage. So they tend to be in areas that are a little grassy or a little structured. They have lots of different things to hide in, and the stripes help camouflage them from predators and kind of mask where they are. So here are some more spadefish, just like that one we saw in that first tank, as well as a sea trout who's over here in the corner. He's a very, very shy fish, so he doesn't tend to come up very much when we're recording. We've also got a very beloved little guy down here. This is our striped burrfish, hairy puffer. So he was actually born here at the museum. He's a little hard to see because it's a little dark there, and he's so small that this camera has a hard time focusing. But you can see he's super tiny. He's only about an inch long, and he's been with us for about a little bit less than a year. He was born in June of last year, and he is the only survivor from his entire batch of babies. So a lot of puffers have lots and lots of babies, hundreds of babies at one time, and only one or two might survive to his size or older. So he's a really big survivor. That's actually why we called him Hairy Puffer, because he's the burr who lived, for Harry Potter fans out there. And you can see he's got a little companion in this tank. He lives with northern kingfish, which is that dark fish that's in the back there. And that fish is very non-aggressive, very sweet, so we figured they'd be good buddies. So we put them in the same tank together. All right, so we have a question from Zach that says, are the spadefish in a large enough tank? They are for right now, but as they get bigger, they're gonna be moved into even bigger tanks. So we kind of monitor how big they are, and then as they grow, we move them into proper size tanks later on. All right. I don't know how well you can see him, but towards the back there in that corner, laying on the bottom, kind of looking at us with a big frown on his face, is our scorpion fish. And this scorpion fish I typically call chicken nugget, because he does look a lot like a little chicken nugget. And he is an ambush predator. So he likes to just kind of lie in wait near some rocks or oyster shells, or even just on the bottom pretending to be a rock. And he'll wait for a fish to swim right by his face, and even potentially land on his face if it's something like a little shrimp. And then he'll just kind of shoot his mouth open and grab that fish and suck it in using like a vacuum pressure, and he'll just pull that fish in and he'll eat it. And as long as it's small enough to fit inside his mouth, he will try to eat it. So we actually have to give him live food because he's very picky. So we stock this tank with some small fish and shrimp early in the morning, and he eats them throughout the day. In this little tank right here, we've got lots of blennies and some gobies in here as well. So they are small fish that are also structure fish. You've probably heard me say that word a bunch of times, meaning they like those oyster shells, they like places to hide, which is why we have the PVC in here. And you can see they kind of sit on the bottom, whereas most fish swim around a lot. So you can see him kind of breathing heavily. That's because he is opening and closing his gills manually in order to pump water over them. So he doesn't swim all the time. He's not getting as much oxygen. He just kind of sits on the bottom, breathes heavily, and goes about his day. And we've got an empty tank right there. And then we have a blue crab in here, of course. Everyone loves blue crabs. We have to keep blue crabs separate from each other. There can only be one per tank because they are very aggressive and they will try to eat each other. And this one is actually a female. She's got a little triangle on her belly there. That's her apron. She is not yet breeding age. When she does become breeding age, that triangle will turn kind of into a dome, more of a dome shape. And that's how she carries her eggs. All right, so in the back of this tank here, you can see some mohara. Mohara are a very hard fish to identify. There are many, many types of mohara, and it's hard to tell exactly which species they are without doing genetic analysis. So we don't know exactly what they are. They could be tidewater ones. That's probably the most likely, just based on the range. And they're a very timid fish, so they kind of hang out in the back as well. Someone has a question. Mackenzie is wondering, what is the water that's coming up? If you're talking about that pipe that's in the back there, that's just water that is pouring out of this tank down the filtration system. So each of these tanks has its own little water pipe. All right, so moving on over here, we'll see if you can see this. It might be a little bit hard to see them. We have lots and lots of white shrimp down here on the bottom. So they are those dark kind of tubes that are laying on the bottom there. Those are the same kinds of shrimp that you would eat at a restaurant. So we can catch them here. They're very, very common at certain times of the year. So we've got a tank stocked full of them for our crustacean exhibits. All right, so next I'm gonna go to one of my favorite tanks with several of our very cool animals in here. But first I'm gonna grab a little ball here. So this ball is full of food. So this is an enrichment item, and it is specifically for this guy right here. So I'm gonna put this down really quickly so I can get myself situated. He is called a sea robin, and he's a striped sea robin. So he is one of the largest kinds of sea robins, and one that we don't always see here. They're not super, super common. And he can actually glide using those very large pectoral fins that you can see there. And you may notice that he has a little notch taken out of one of his fins. That is why he's in here, because someone was picking on him. So we put him in his own tank here with a little bit less aggressive fish as well. And sea robins are very interesting fish. And you might be able to see he's got what look like little legs underneath him. And I'll put his enrichment item in here and you may be able to see it a little better. Will you see those little tiny legs? Let's see if he goes for it. Those legs are just spines from his pectoral fin. So it's a modified part of that fin. And he can actually use them to crawl along the bottom, and he uses them to find food sometimes. So they're very sensitive. They're kind of creepy if you see them head on. But they're very, very useful adaptations. And I'll see if I can find the other two fish that are in this tank, because they're also very interesting. In that little tube down there, it's probably very hard to see, is a sheep's head. And sheep's head are different from sheep's head minnows, which are another fish that we have here at the museum. And they are a much larger, kind of semi-aggressive sometimes fish. And they have very interesting teeth, and I would love to be able to show you their teeth. I'm going to try to find a picture and post it online later, or I'll see if Alexis can find one. And their lower jaw is covered in rows of teeth. And you might immediately think shark when you think of rows and rows of teeth, but it's a little bit different. They're kind of shaped like human teeth, which is very, very unusual. And they're really good at crushing their food. So sometimes people will be at the beach and they'll find what looks like a human tooth in the water. That's most likely just a sheep's head tooth. Genevieve is wondering how big a sea robin gets. Sure. And the sea robins this particular type of sea robin gets to about 2.5 feet. So they're a pretty large one. And you can imagine watching something that's 2.5 feet jump out of the water and glide a little bit like a flying fish. It's probably a little surprising. I've personally never seen one that size jump like that, but it can definitely happen. And right down there in that tube is a very, very, very cool fish. It's one of my favorite fish here. It's called an oyster toadfish. And oyster toadfish can get to a little bit less than 2 feet long. And they are another ambush predator. So they hide in tubes like this, or behind rocks, or under vegetation, things like that. And they wait for their prey, and they'll jump out and grab it as well. But toadfish are super cool in my opinion, partially because of what humans have done with them. They have gone to space. So 2 oyster toadfish were actually sent into space by NASA so that people could do studies on how microgravity affects the inner ear bones of fish and how it might affect human balance and motion sickness. So they are really, really cool fish in my opinion, if only for that, but also for many, many more reasons. They're also very protective of their young. The female will lay her eggs, which are some of the largest eggs that you can find in the Chesapeake Bay fishes. And he'll fertilize those eggs, and then when the eggs hatch, the male will actually protect those babies for a long time. So he'll actually wait till they're maybe 2 inches long or so, and then they'll go off and take care of themselves. All right, so moving on to this next tank here. This is a freshwater tank. So everything we've seen so far has been salt water, but this is one of our freshwater quarantine tanks. And in this tank right here, we've got lots of sunfish, which many of you may have caught before. There's some pumpkin seeds and a variety of hybrids and things like that. Sunfish are active breeders with other species, so they'll actually crossbreed a lot. So it's a little bit hard to tell which species is which sometimes. They're very beautiful fish though. You can see a male right there. He's got some gorgeous coloration and patterning. They do look hungry. They have already been fed, but they will eat anytime you throw food in there. So we limit the amount of food that they can get to preserve the water quality and make sure they stay nice and healthy and a good weight. And in the back here, this tank are some more very timid fish. These are yellow perch, which is another commonly caught freshwater fish around here. And if any of you guys dissected fish in college or in high school, there's a good chance it was a yellow perch. They're really common for that kind of activity. And then down here we've got two largemouth bass. Let's see if I can see them. So there's one right there. You can see him. He has a dark stripe along his side, which is one of the easiest ways to tell a largemouth bass from the smallmouth bass, which is another freshwater bass we get here in Virginia. And there's another bass in this tank. And then we move on to the last tank that I'm going to be showing you today, which has some more of my favorite fish. This is a multi-species tank with several different kinds of fish in it. First we have our little gray snapper, which is also sometimes called a mangrove snapper. And that's because they love structure. Again, another structure fish. These guys can be found in and around mangrove trees. So they love those roots that they can hide in amongst. And they have a little tooth, a pair of canine teeth that look a little bit like dog teeth. I don't know if you can see them, but when he's the largest fish in the tank, he will pick on other fish. But because he's the smallest one in here, he doesn't pick on anybody else. He's pretty sweet. And I think they're a very, very handsome fish. They're just beautiful with that black stripe. And then we have the pork fish right here. So there are lots of different fish that are named after pigs. So pork fish is one of them. There's also hogfish and pigfish and many other things. But the pork fish is a member of the grunt family. And the grunt family, they make this sound that gives them their name. It's a very grunting sort of sound. So when he's stressed out or when he's trying to find a mate, he's going to make a very piggish sound, which is another reason why they're called pork fish. Then over right here we have our pork fish's best friend. They actually school together sometimes. And this is a spot-fin butterfly fish. So it's a long name, and it is a tropical fish. So this is not a fish that you would normally find in Virginia or even anywhere up this far north or more north than this. It is a tropical orphan, which means that it was caught in a storm or a strong current and brought up further north than it would normally be found. This is normally a Caribbean species of fish. And you can see it's got a big spot on its dorsal fin up there. There's a dark spot and then there's kind of a lighter spot. It's believed that those spots actually help prevent them from getting eaten by predators because the predator thinks that its eyes are on the other side of its body. So the fish is able to swim away faster and make sure that its head and its face are nice and protected. So if the predator gets a little bit of them, they just get the tail end. And then back there in the corner, being a complete goofball like she always is our porcupine fish. So we have one porcupine fish on exhibit. And if you watch one of our older live streams, I actually introduce you guys to that one as well. But this one right here, she's a little bit smaller. And she's still in this tank because she is so small that she's not big enough to go into our puffer exhibit yet. So I also brought some enrichment for her, which I'm gonna have to go back and get because I left it over with that other piece. And we'll see if she goes after it. She might not since she has already eaten today, but we'll see. So let me give me one moment and I will be right back to that tank in just a second. So this is the tank that the toy that I have for her today. This is an enrichment item. It has a little ball on the inside as well as some food. And I'm going to toss that in and see if she goes for it. She usually really likes this, but again, this is kind of a weird time of day for her to get fed. So we'll see. She may not even notice it. Oh, there she goes. And if she doesn't interact with it, then the pork fish probably will. He loves to eat her leftovers and he'll push that ball around just like she will. But I'm hoping she pays a little bit of attention to it because she's very, very sweet. We have a question from Lily, who is 6 years old from Bronx, New York. Welcome, Lily. Why do the fish all have different lines and colors? Well, that's a very good question. There's a lot of different reasons why different fish have different coloration and different patterns. A lot of the time it has to do with camouflage. So an animal tends to look a lot like its environment. So if it lives in amongst lots of grasses or rocks, it might have kind of stripes along its body or spots that break up its silhouette, basically. So it's a lot like a zebra where they have those stripes to break up their form and make them look not quite like something that's edible. So they hide really well with those stripes. And other fish that are very brightly colored might be brightly colored because it helps them attract a mate. So ladyfish sometimes think that very colorful males are the most attractive, so sometimes they have those colorations for that reason as well. And some fish can even change colors, so you may see them flashing some different bits of color every once in a while. There are some fish that have a wide range of coloration depending on their mood, and they'll actually communicate with other fish using those colorations. So she's not really super interested in the item today, so I'm gonna kind of give her some space. She's just a little shy today. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. You can either ask here while I'm doing the rest of this live stream. I'll be on here another minute or so. Or you can put them in the comments and we'll get to them after this video. Yeah, so she doesn't seem super interested. So I'm gonna focus a little bit more on him. And so I have a question for everybody. Since I don't get to ask people this in person at the Virginia Living Museum right now, what are your favorite fishes? Do you have a favorite fish in our collection? And is there one tank that you like more than any other tank? I would love to be able to do a little a live stream video on your favorite tanks if possible. So let us know in the comments. All right, well, I'm gonna wrap it. So thank you guys very much for joining us today for another live stream. Join us again later when I'm going to be doing an enrichment exercise with our catfish and our carp in our swamp exhibit. So I haven't quite decided what I'm doing with them yet, so it's going to be a surprise for everybody. But that'll be at 2:30 today. And if you guys are wondering how to help us out during this time when we're closed and we have a lot of shutdowns going on right now, we rely a lot on your visitation for our revenue and for money to take care of all these animals. So if you feel so inclined, we would greatly appreciate any kind of donations you guys have. There's many ways to do that. You can just make a donation, or you can symbolically adopt an animal. There's other kinds of ways to do it as well, and you can find information on how to do that at thevlm.org, which is THEVLM.org. And we've also got lots of other content that we're posting constantly while we're closed. We still want to keep you guys connected to nature in every way possible. So we've got lots and lots of posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, anywhere you can think of. We've probably got some posts there. But thank you guys very much for watching. And again, come visit us again sometime when we're open. And we miss you guys a lot. It's very quiet here. But we hope you guys have a great day. See you next time.